Dear ladies and gentlemen, today we step into a conversation that many people shy away from: infidelity. It's not just about broken trust. It's about the silent signals, the quiet changes, the moments when your intuition whispers that something isn't right. When a partner drifts into an affair, the signs are rarely loud. They show up in the pauses between conversations, in the distance felt when sitting right next to them, in the patterns that once felt familiar but suddenly feel foreign. This isn't about paranoia or blame. This is about awareness, about giving yourself permission to see what you see and to honor your truth. Recognizing the signs is not about catching someone. It's about reclaiming clarity, dignity, and courage for yourself. So, let's talk about 7 signs that may indicate your partner is having an affair with someone else. Not as a list to spark fear, but as a map to help you navigate uncertainty with open eyes and steady heart. When a partner begins to withdraw emotionally, it rarely looks like a dramatic exit. It's more like a slow fading of color from a once vivid picture. You might notice it first in the silences, where there used to be laughter, shared stories, and small, ordinary conversations about your day. There is now a kind of emptiness. They sit next to you on the couch, but their mind feels miles away. You reach out with a question or a thought, and instead of the usual warmth or curiosity, you're met with short, clipped replies or distracted nods. It's not that they're gone physically. It's that the connection that once made you feel seen and heard has thinned to something fragile and uncertain. This emotional distance often shows up in the subtle ways they stop investing in your world. Maybe they used to remember little details: your favorite coffee order, the name of that coworker you always complained about, or the way you like your blanket tucked when you fall asleep. And suddenly those small acts of care are missing. They might still go through the motions, sharing meals, making plans, but the energy behind it feels different. It feels like a duty rather than a desire. You may also feel it most in moments when you need them emotionally. Perhaps you come home excited about something important to you, but instead of leaning in, their attention drifts. Or when you're struggling and you reach for comfort, you notice their patience is shorter, their tone sharper, or their presence less reassuring. There's a gap that you can't quite close, no matter how hard you try. And here's the hardest part: this kind of distance can make you question yourself. You might wonder if you've done something wrong, if you're no longer interesting, if you're asking for too much. But the truth is, emotional absence speaks volumes. It tells you something has shifted, not necessarily in your worth, but in the commitment and focus of the relationship. Emotional intimacy is built on consistency, showing up, being curious, listening, sharing. When that consistency vanishes, the bond begins to fray. You start to feel like you're carrying the weight of the relationship alone, putting in effort to connect while they stand on the other side of the wall they've quietly built. And what makes this so painful is that the wall is invisible. From the outside, things might look fine. Dinners are eaten, routines are followed, but inside, the connection you once trusted feels fragile, sometimes even non-existent. It's in these moments that your heart begins to recognize the difference between being partnered and being accompanied. One feels like sharing life together. The other feels like sitting side by side in silence while your souls drift apart. When secrecy begins to weave its way into a relationship, it doesn't usually announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly, through little changes that at first seem insignificant, but over time grow impossible to ignore. You may start to notice a shift in the way your partner handles their phone. Where once it sat casually on the table, screen visible, now it's flipped face down, locked tightly behind a passcode you don't know. Conversations that used to flow freely about their day are suddenly guarded, vague, or brushed aside with nothing much. They may step out of the room to take certain calls, lower their voice, or suddenly become unusually protective of their privacy in ways that feel inconsistent with how things used to be. What makes secrecy so disorienting is that it creates a new atmosphere in the relationship, an air of suspicion, where things that were once ordinary now carry hidden weight. Maybe they delete messages quickly, close their laptop screen the moment you walk by, or take their phone with them everywhere, even into the bathroom. It's not the act itself that feels strange, but the energy behind it, the sense that something is being hidden deliberately. Trust thrives in openness, in the comfort of knowing that there is nothing to conceal. When secrecy replaces that openness, trust begins to wither, leaving you questioning what you can no longer see. Secrecy doesn't just live in the digital world. It shows up in daily routines too. Where once you knew the general rhythm of their day, now there are gaps in their schedule that they don't explain. Times they come home later than usual without a clear reason, or vague answers when you ask where they've been. It isn't about controlling or monitoring someone. It's about the natural transparency that partners typically share. When that transparency is replaced by evasion, it sparks a quiet alarm in your intuition. You start to notice patterns, the sudden urge to run errands that never used to exist, the reluctance to share details about new acquaintances, the abrupt need for extra space without context. Perhaps the most painful part of secrecy is the way it makes you doubt yourself. You might feel torn between trusting your partner and trusting your instincts. On one hand, you don't want to jump to conclusions or appear controlling. On the other hand, the changes are undeniable, and pretending not to see them only deepens the ache. That tension between wanting to trust and sensing you're being left in the dark can be exhausting. It can leave you questioning your own perceptions, wondering if you're imagining things or if you're simply not good enough to be trusted with the truth. Over time, secrecy begins to erode the foundation of safety in the relationship. A true partnership rests on the belief that you can rely on each other, that there are no hidden corners where betrayal can grow. When secrecy becomes a habit, every locked screen, every withheld answer, every unexplained absence becomes another crack in that foundation. It's not just about what is being hidden, it's about the distance that secrecy creates, the invisible barrier that tells you, you are no longer invited into this part of my life. And once that barrier is there, the relationship stops feeling like a shared journey and begins to feel like two parallel paths, running close but no longer connected. When sudden and unexplained changes begin to appear in your partner's behavior, they can feel both intriguing and unsettling at the same time. At first, these shifts may seem harmless, even exciting. Maybe they start dressing differently, paying more attention to their appearance, or adopting new habits and interests that they never showed enthusiasm for before. They might invest in a new wardrobe, experiment with fragrances, or suddenly begin hitting the gym with a level of consistency that feels unusual compared to the past. Of course, people grow, people evolve, and sometimes these changes are simply part of personal development. But when they come abruptly, without a story behind them, without context, they can raise quiet questions in your heart. What makes these changes so noticeable is the way they alter the rhythm of your relationship. Perhaps your partner begins showing an unusual interest in hobbies or music styles they never cared for in the past, or they suddenly pick up slang, phrases, or ways of speaking that feel foreign. The dynamic you once shared, they may spend more time curating their online presence, carefully posed photos, more activity on social media, or new circles of friends you've never heard of. These shifts may be subtle at first, but they accumulate, forming a pattern that doesn't quite match the person you thought you knew. There's also a certain energy in these unexplained changes that can feel distinctly different. It might be the way they light up when texting someone, the way they brush off your curiosity about their new habits, or the sudden defensiveness when you ask simple questions. Their daily routines may start to rearrange, working late more often, scheduling activities that don't seem to include you, or adopting new rituals that never existed before. And while all of these things could have perfectly innocent explanations, the lack of transparency around them is what creates unease. The hardest part about these sudden transformations is how they make you feel. They can leave you wondering why you weren't invited into this newness, why you weren't a part of the changes unfolding in your partner's life. You might feel excluded, as though you're watching from the outside while someone you love steps into a version of themselves that no longer includes you. Instead of sharing discoveries together, it can feel like they are carving out a private world, one that exists beyond your reach. Unexplained changes can also highlight a painful contrast between past and present. You remember how your partner once shared every little update with you. The small victories, the new playlists, the sudden cravings. Now the flow of that sharing has dried up, replaced by silence or half-hearted responses. You notice them guarding this new part of themselves, and the very act of exclusion makes the changes feel suspicious. It's not just about what they are doing differently. It's about why they feel the need to do it without you. Why this transformation is shrouded in distance rather than rooted in connection. And beneath all of this, what stirs the deepest discomfort is the sense that these changes aren't random at all, that they might be shaped by someone else's influence. The sudden attention to looks, the newfound hobbies, the phrases that don't sound like theirs, all of it hints at a new presence, someone quietly reshaping their world. Whether or not that suspicion is true, the impact on you is undeniable. You feel the shift, you sense the divide, and you're left holding the weight of questions that your partner isn't willing to answer. When intimacy begins to fade in a relationship, it often doesn't disappear all at once. It ebbs gradually, slipping through the cracks until one day you realize how far the distance has grown. Intimacy is more than just physical closeness. It is the shared looks, the inside jokes, the quiet comfort of knowing that you are deeply connected, body and soul. When that closeness starts to dwindle, it can leave you feeling like a stranger in the same house, someone standing on the other side of an invisible wall you didn't know had been built. You may notice it first in the physical touch. The hugs feel shorter, the kisses more routine. The small gestures of affection that once carried warmth now feel mechanical, almost obligatory. Nights that used to be filled with closeness become filled with excuses. I'm tired. I have an early morning. I just don't feel like it. The spark that once drew you together begins to dim, and the absence of touch creates a void that no words can quite fill. That lack of intimacy becomes a constant reminder that something important has shifted between you. But intimacy isn't only about physical connection. It's about the emotional bond that underpins it. Perhaps they no longer share their thoughts with you the way they used to. Conversations that once flowed easily now stall, reduced to surface, level exchanges about schedules or chores. The deep talks, the kind where you both stayed up too late, laughing or dreaming, are replaced by silence, scrolling on phones, or retreating into separate worlds. You start to notice that the laughter feels less frequent, the spark in their eyes when they look at you has faded, and the sense of partnership that intimacy nurtures feels weaker. This decline can show up in subtle rejections, too. Maybe you reach out to hold their hand, and they pull away under the guise of distraction. Maybe you lean in for a kiss, and it lands half-heartedly, without the presence it once had. These moments, though small, cut deeply, because they chip away at the security of being wanted, of being chosen. When intimacy lessens, it often leaves you questioning yourself, wondering if you're no longer attractive enough, no longer exciting, no longer worthy of that closeness you once shared so easily. And while intimacy naturally fluctuates in long-term relationships, what makes this kind of withdrawal different is its persistence. It's not a temporary lull, it becomes a new pattern. The decline feels intentional, even if it isn't spoken aloud. It creates an ache that grows heavier with each passing day, because what you crave is not simply the act of intimacy. It is the reassurance, the connection, the affirmation that you still matter in the most personal and tender way. What hurts the most is that intimacy is often the thread that keeps a relationship feeling alive, vibrant, and safe. Without it, the bond feels fragile, as though you are living parallel lives rather than one shared life. The absence of closeness doesn't just deprive you of affection, it isolates you, leaving you with a quiet grief for the love that once felt effortless, now replaced by distance that lingers in every room of your shared space. When inconsistencies begin to surface in what your partner says and does, it can feel like trying to piece together a puzzle where the edges no longer fit. At first, the contradictions may seem small, almost dismissible. They tell you they were working late, but the timeline doesn't quite add up. They mention they went somewhere, but when you ask about details, their answers are vague or conflicting. You might hear them share one version of a story with you, and later, when they repeat it, certain details change, leaving you quietly wondering why the truth doesn't remain steady. These inconsistencies are not always glaring lies, they're often subtle shifts, little cracks in the narrative that raise more questions than answers. Maybe they told you they were exhausted from work, yet their energy online seems vibrant, active, and engaged. Maybe they said they were with a certain friend, but later that friend mentions something that doesn't align. Over time, these mismatches become harder to ignore. You find yourself mentally tracking their words, replaying conversations, trying to make sense of the pieces that don't fit together. It's exhausting because a relationship should be a place where you feel secure, not a place where you're constantly deciphering hidden meanings. The heartache of inconsistent stories is not only in the words themselves, but in what they imply, a gap between honesty and reality. Trust is built on reliability, the comfort of knowing that what your partner says reflects the truth. When stories begin to bend or shift, it shakes that trust. You start to feel like you're not being invited into the real version of their life, that parts of the story are being edited before they reach you. And once you begin to notice these patterns, every new answer carries weight. Was that the truth, or just another carefully crafted explanation? What makes this particularly painful is the erosion of safety. In healthy relationships, you don't have to second guess the words that come from someone you love. You simply believe them because they've shown themselves to be consistent. But when that consistency breaks, doubt slips in. Even when you want to believe, your instincts whisper otherwise. This creates an internal conflict. One part of you craves the comfort of trust, while another part knows that the truth doesn't always match the story you're being given. Sometimes the inconsistencies aren't about lies of commission, but lies of omission. They leave out important details, tell you half the story, or conveniently forget to mention things that later surface in passing. These omissions sting because they remind you that honesty is being selectively offered, that you're being kept on the outside of certain truths. It's not just the missing details that hurt. It's the realization that the omission itself was intentional, a choice made to keep you in the dark. And then there's the defensiveness. When you gently point out contradictions or ask for clarity instead of open conversation, you're met with irritation, dismissiveness, or even anger. They may accuse you of overthinking, of not trusting, of creating problems where none exist. This defensiveness doesn't resolve the inconsistencies. It deepens them, making you question not just their words, but your own ability to judge reality. You start to feel like you're losing your footing, unsure whether to trust them yourself or neither. The damage caused by inconsistent stories goes beyond the facts themselves. It gnaws at the very core of connection, because when words and reality don't align, intimacy becomes impossible. You can't fully open yourself to someone if you're unsure whether the foundation beneath you is steady. What was once a place of comfort and certainty becomes a landscape of doubt, where every sentence feels like it might hold a hidden twist. Every reassurance feels like it might be hollow. And as those cracks widen, you find yourself carrying the heavy burden of mistrust, even if you never wanted to. There is something profoundly powerful about intuition, that deep inner knowing that speaks in whispers rather than shouts. It doesn't come to you with hard evidence or neat explanations. It shows up as a feeling in your chest, a weight in your stomach, or a quiet voice at the back of your mind saying, "Something is different here." When your partner is having an affair or drifting away emotionally, your intuition often senses it long before you can piece together the facts. It notices the pauses, the hesitations, the subtle shifts in energy that words alone cannot disguise. Even when everything on the surface seems fine, your body registers the disconnect, telling you that what you're experiencing doesn't align with what you're being told. What makes intuition so difficult to navigate is the way it collides with your desire for certainty. On one hand, you feel something isn't right. On the other, you long to dismiss it, to believe that you're imagining things, to hold onto the comfort of trust. You may even scold yourself for being paranoid or insecure. Yet no matter how much you try to push it aside, the feeling lingers. It comes back in quiet moments, when you're lying awake at night replaying conversations, or when you notice the way their eyes avoid yours in certain situations. Intuition doesn't give up easily, it stays with you, nudging you toward truths you might not be ready to face. This inner voice can feel both like a gift and a burden. It's a gift because it protects you, because it often notices what logic cannot. It's the part of you that recognizes patterns, tone shifts, or inconsistencies that your conscious mind may overlook. But it can feel like a burden too, because living with that awareness without proof can be excruciating. You may feel torn between confronting your partner and staying silent, between trusting your instincts and clinging to the hope that you're wrong. That tension creates a kind of emotional storm: anxiety, doubt, fear, all swirling together, leaving you unsettled and restless. Sometimes intuition shows up in the smallest details. It's the way your partner pulls their phone closer when you enter the room, the unusual silence after a message arrives, or the sudden disinterest in moments they once cherished with you. It's not one action alone, but the collection of little changes that build into a larger picture your body can't ignore. You might not even be able to articulate exactly why you feel this way, but the energy has shifted and you can sense it. The challenge is that intuition often asks you to trust yourself when the person you love most is giving you reasons not to. They may reassure you that nothing is wrong, tell you you're imagining things, or even laugh off your concerns. This can make you doubt your own reality, leaving you stuck in a painful loop of wondering if your feelings are valid. Yet, deep down, your intuition rarely lies. It is rooted in your ability to perceive subtle changes in someone you know intimately. You've memorized their rhythms, their expressions, their moods, and when those patterns change, your inner self notices long before your conscious mind can explain why. And perhaps the deepest ache of all is realizing how alone intuition can make you feel. It isolates you because it's not something you can easily prove or explain to others. It's a knowing that lives in your body, a private truth you carry quietly while you wait for clarity to catch up. But the weight of that knowledge is heavy, because once you sense that something is wrong, it's nearly impossible to unfeel it. It lingers in every interaction, every glance, every moment of silence, reminding you that the reality you once trusted may not be the one you're living in anymore. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, these signs are not here to fuel fear, nor to push you towards suspicion at every turn. They are here to remind you that your heart deserves honesty, your mind deserves clarity, and your soul deserves peace. Relationships are built on trust, and when that trust begins to fracture, it is not weakness to acknowledge it, it is courage. If you recognize these patterns, remember this. Awareness is not the end, it is the beginning. It is the beginning of reclaiming your voice, setting boundaries, and choosing the kind of love that honors your worth. You cannot control someone else's choices, but you can always choose how to respond. With dignity, with self-respect, and with the quiet strength of someone who knows they deserve more than half-truths and hidden lives. At the heart of it all, this is not a story about betrayal. It is a story about you. About your courage to see clearly, to listen deeply, and to trust the wisdom within you. Because when you honor your truth, you are never powerless. You are free.